What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where as always, I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above. Now, I totally understand that it is New Year's Eve. It's a holiday sort of weekend here. Not a lot of people will be at their desks, but what we're going to do today is take a quick tour through some of the weekly charts on our list of coins from up here. Just see how things are positioned as we head into the new year. So, kicking things off on the Bitcoin weekly chart, not the daily, the weekly here. The first thing that I would notice is that there's a potential for two bearish patterns to unfold here. The first one is the bear flag on the weekly, and that would involve a breakdown underneath roughly this 45,800 mark, 46,000. Generally, this area of support in here, we know if that gives, we should look for the next target underneath at 41,000. It was the top end of this block of consolidation from back in here, and then we did use it as support before making that nice run. We've talked about the importance of that level in the past as well. So that is bear scenario number one. The other bearish scenario is, of course, the potential for a head and shoulders, right? And again, it's a very similar breakdown point. Obviously, your neckline is here. If you want to do it the true way a head and shoulders should be drawn in, it would be the neckline. But again, those 2 points are sort of intersecting. Now, this would mean a larger target, right? You're typically looking to travel the distance from the head to the neckline, and just sort of adding that on top. I would say that that easily takes us underneath this floor from in here around 31,659. Now, I wouldn't be, overly aggressive and look for that 25,000. I would really watch and see if this does hold up as support first. And as you know, if you've been watching the channel, my general strategy is to dollar cost average into coins for longer term holdings. I would probably be a buyer here, right? I'm definitely going to be a buyer here and would probably be a buyer here as well based on our weekly time frame chart and prior support, right? For me, it's just a small chunk of change that if it does something fantastic, if not a huge deal in my portfolio. So that's the outlook here on the Bitcoin weekly chart. Nothing about it is really, screaming bullish. The one thing I suppose is a saving grace as of right now is the fact that we are continuing, if this does hold around here, to form higher lows, which is a good thing for the bulls. The next thing we would want to see is, of course, a new higher high, right? So if we're going to continue this uptrend, there is a significant amount of work to be done from the buyers. Let's continue on and talk about Ethereum up next. And what I would just encourage us to do here is look to the left, right? We're very clearly sitting and hanging out around the highs. Now, granted, yes, we have seen a couple of weeks of consolidation and pullback here. It might feel kind of nasty, but overwhelmingly, this one is, in comparison to Bitcoin and what we just saw on that chart, it's a little bit more bullish, right? You can clearly see how our lows, our recent lows, are stacking in the higher direction. We have new highs, from this sort of perspective there. So from that, outlook, a little bit more bullish here inside of Ethereum. The trend is more cleanly up instead of more sideways. The pullback isn't as aggressive in terms of the most recent lows. And again, this is from the weekly time frame chart. Sure, there's more nuance, and if you're just scalping this thing back and forth, it's probably felt pretty bearish over the past couple of weeks, but I just don't want you to forget, that longer term perspective here. Now, yes, this support trend line is no longer really any good. For now, I would really just encourage you to pay attention to these big lows here as we head into the new year. Does 2,800 hold? Does 3,000, the nice round psychological number, hold from this area of support in here if the pullback is any further? Now, if we bounce out of it, what do we need to see? Well, just like in Bitcoin, we do need that higher high to avoid the instance where we get something like this, right? What did I just draw in? Once again, you sort of get that head and shoulders pattern. I'm not saying it's going to happen that way, but it's just one scenario to watch out for. The bear flag on the weekly is not present here inside of Ethereum like we saw in Bitcoin. So a little bit more speculation going on in this one in terms of the bearish patterns. For now, I would say it's a little bit more bullish than Bitcoin, as we just pointed out. Next up, we have Binance Coin. Some crazy trend lines considering those were drawn on shorter time frame charts. But for now, I just want to do the same thing, really zoom out. You can see that we are hanging out still up closer to the highs after a very impressive run from the earlier part of 2021. And I mean, that was obviously kind of when Binance, became a larger exchange, of course. But for now, hanging high and tight, right? It's not really like the end of the world here either. A little bit different than Ethereum because we have these prior highs that, we did not have to contend with in Ethereum. And for now, I would just encourage you to, once again, watch out for your higher lows to continue forming. From a very nuanced perspective, here was a set of highs, higher highs, higher highs. As long as we bounce and set a new set of higher highs early on in 2022, fine. The uptrend can continue. We can then afford a higher low pullback. From there, we would look for more nuanced setups. But for now, not really seeing any major issues inside of Binance Coin. I would even start to argue that this support trend line starts to become a little bit valid, right? If we do something like that, giving us much more room to pull back into and still form a new healthy higher low. Again, I'm not seeing any potential head and shoulders pattern. I'm not seeing a bear flag here on the weekly. As long as we come into this and support support out of it. I do think things are fine here inside of Binance Coin. Next up, we have Cardano. We know that this one was coming into that all-important floor at and around $1 even, and I do still think that could be in play based on the bearish nature of what's going on here, starting to form a bear flag on the weekly. We also have had a 100% retracement now of that huge relative strength move. Again, it's very rare when you retrace 100% of a move that you just immediately break through. So I'm not surprised to see this little bit of dead cat bounce here. So anything that takes this out, again, it's bringing back into question that big bad, well, it's not bad, but that big round number here, $1 inside of Cardano. Are people going to buy it up? Is it going to be a strong enough psychological level for people to say, wow, it's at $1, may as well just buy some more. It's so cheap. So to me, that's really the area to watch out for as we head into 2022. If we come into it and bounce off of it in a strong way, fantastic. We know that we are potentially in store for a little bit more of a serious bounce off of that level, noting the strength of it from in here in the past, right? We have all of these interactions. I would expect it to produce a significant bounce. Now, if we just slice right through it, then that's where you probably look out and say, you know what, maybe Cardano is not the move into 2022 unless we get some bigger reversal patterns going on the weekly time frame chart. Next up, we have Solana, and this one again, just sort of coming into the sights of many newer, or not newer, but it's a newer coin, correct? That's essentially what I'm getting at here. So you can see our history isn't that great off to the left, flat, and then as it was adopted, big spike higher. And again, we're hanging out here towards the upper end. It's not like we're way back lower, sub 50 even, like underneath this area right here. So to me, it just strikes me as relative strength. Sure, as the rest of the crypto market pulls back and sort of cools off like what we saw in Bitcoin, the fact that this is still up here is fantastic. It's not just one of those crummy projects which is going to collapse all the way back down to its base, its floor, which I would start to argue would be close to about $20. It doesn't look that way, right? Sure, we do get a little bit of bear flag action from this perspective right here. Sure, it could go a little bit lower, but the line in the sand for Solana as we head into 2022 would probably just be these sets of lows around 130, correct? So watch out for that as we head into the new year. Obviously, any breaks of the major resistance trend line here do start to change the trend back to higher, and we would just watch out for equal highs and potentially new all-time highs after that in Solana. In terms of lows getting higher, again, something like this looks phenomenal. Highs getting higher as well. The next thing we would need, of course, is that new higher high to continue the daily and even weekly here actually uptrend. Next up, Litecoin. We know that this one's been all over the place. Relative weakness compared to what we've seen across all of the other coins we've looked at so far, noting that we haven't even come close to that prior all-time high. Big sets of lower highs in here. Again, 100% retracement wouldn't, and I'm not surprised to see it going sideways here and not just immediately slicing on through, but we are forming a massive bear flag here on the weekly, giving up that support trend line as well. None of these upper levels are really going to be too relevant, at least from this outlook that we're taking here on the weekly time frame chart. For now, if this bear flag does break down, it's all about this support portion here at the 143. If it goes, we're just looking for equal lows here at 106.38, and from there, that's going to kind of be that line in the sand here for Litecoin into 2022. If we fall underneath it, again, looking left, probably comes back down towards this base closer to about $50 excuse me, inside of the coin. On any sort of uptick out of this flag, it's got to be a break up and over the highs at 165, and maybe, if we're lucky, we start to get into some of those upper levels. For me, again, just seeing the relative weakness here, it's not one of the names that I would continue to keep on the top of your list if you're looking for longer term holds. Next up, we have Ripple. This one as well, sort of consolidating here. It's been around for a while. Obviously, there was this madness from in the past. But in terms of, as it stabilized out here and this most recent uptake, it's really just consolidating, to be quite honest with you. From the weekly time frame chart, you can start to do something like this for resistance trend line, and you can start to do something like this for a support trend line, right? So we're coming into this crux in the early part of 2022 where we're either going to break trend to the downside or we're going to break trend back to the upside, in which case maybe that is in store here around, let's just call it 135 for round numbers sake. So keep an eye on Ripple as this triangle continues to pan out. It's a big one, right? It's essentially lasted all of 2021. We'll see if it does ultimately determine a direction for 2022 on a break one way or another. Granted, on this most recent sort of leg down, yes, we do get the bear flag activity. Yes, we do have a significant lower high here. It doesn't look fantastic for a turnaround, and we're testing that support trend line as I'm speaking currently. So maybe start to favor breakdowns and keep this one on on your sort of radar for if we come into this level around the 59-cent mark and we start printing reversal patterns. Could just be a simple weekly hammer candle, could be a double bottom there on the weekly, right? Something like this, break the neckline, takes you back higher. That would be my next area to potentially look for reversals. If that goes, we know there's quite a ways to go to the base of the triangle, closer to about 20 cents. So that's Ripple as we head into 2022. Polkadot is up next, another newer coin out there. And I just want to reiterate the fact that, it's kind of hanging out in the midpoint of the range. The resistance trend line from the daily is still certainly in place. Again, these levels aren't too important for this type of analysis, the longer term analysis. You can clearly see on the most recent leg higher, we did set a new higher high. And the question will become ultimately, is this going to be a higher low from what we have in here on the weekly time frame chart? If so, then fantastic. Look for the daily trend line to break there and potentially take us back higher, closer to those levels up around 50. But again, there's a lot of work to be done. And if we just think about this as an overall range right here, whenever we're trading in the midpoint of a range, this is a common theme on the channel, right? Basically, our edge does not exist here. It's either 50-50 that you go higher or lower to test the bottom or top end of the range. Your edge exists at the top end for breakout higher or mean reversion, and the same is true but opposite at the bottom end, right? Mean reversion or a breakdown. As of right now, sitting in the midpoint, again, direction would not seem abundantly clear to me, just going sideways here again from the weekly time frame chart. The other thing we can talk about is, yes, just like on some of our other charts, we are getting some bear flag activity. Your breakdown point is around 23.35 if it goes. Probably just looking for into 2022 at least, equal lows here closer to about 12.50. Let's just go ahead and throw the level on so we can get it right. So 12.78, 12.80, that general area inside of Polkadot. On the upside, again, looking for the top end of the range, close to $45, $50. Next up, we have Crypto.com coin. Again, on the weekly, we're not going to have a whole lot to look at here. So take this kind of with a grain of salt. It really needs to mature and develop into something, probably I would say close to on par with Binance Coin. As of right now, just getting caught in this range the past couple of weeks here. It started to look like it was waking up last week, but ultimately that move was retraced. You're going to have simple over and under levels here into the early part of 2022. It either takes out the top end of the range and we move into 77 or 80, or excuse me, 77, 78 cents-ish. And then the next move would obviously be all-time highs closer to $1, or it's going to take out the low end of this range and probably come back down to do something like this, in which case, Crypto.com coin may just sort of fall off many people's radar. Now, I don't think that that's, a huge likelihood given the sort of nature of the coin as a utility to get involved in DeFi spaces. So to me, I really see it becoming something more like Binance Coin. It will probably find some price somewhere and it will stabilize and kind of just hang out there and then reflect the grander crypto market as a whole. So that's kind of my expectation for 2022. We'll see what happens ultimately. Matic is up next. Of course, this is for Polygon Network. I believe this has more to do with gaming. For now, you can't argue with this chart, right? If you look at the weekly, basically flat as it was sort of in its building phase or whatnot, and then it launches here and we're just hanging out right up at those highs. So I really don't see this as being a bearish chart into 2022. I actually see it as being quite bullish in comparison to almost everything that we've seen so far on our radar. So any sort of pullbacks, which it's doing right now, it is pulling back off of that high, are fine, right? Essentially, we have this weekly support trend line coming in like this, and we can afford to come back down into this breakout point. We know there was a zone down here between 214, 224, about a 10-cent range, or even if it wants to go slightly lower, that's still fine, right? From a weekly trend perspective, we would be well above the support trend line. Looking for bounces out of that, though, to form a new higher high on the weekly time frame to continue that uptrend and keep it healthy, then affording the new higher low pullback, correct? So as of right now, Matic is definitely still a top contender in terms of things to be watching out for. Now, obviously, if it does come down and it does not bounce off of the support trend line, then it probably just goes sideways in here throughout the year, kind of getting caught and chopping around in this range. I don't know a ton about the project and I don't really want to speak out of turn, but from a technical perspective, that's what I would watch for underneath the weekly support trend line. If it eventually breaks it sideways through time, but it's still hanging out high and tight above 220, we'll call it for round numbers sake, then yes, the trend will still be up. We'll be consolidating in some sort, let me clean that up actually, in some sort of a bull flag eventually, right? Something like this, and then maybe it breaks out into the future, but obviously time will have to tell with some scenario like that. And then lastly, we have Luna, which of course is Terra, and this chart as well, just looking absolutely phenomenal, screaming up there towards the highs, and yes, it is pulling back over the course of this past week, but new highs, right? Obviously, we can afford a higher low pullback. Where's your trend line kind of at? Well, we can do a couple of things. We can come in like this and sort of reflect that we are getting lows, higher lows here, higher lows here. And again, the pullback would be fairly aggressive, but it would keep the trend alive. Even if we were to pull back into like 55 here inside of Luna, that would be okay, right? So these are just some broader trends to be paying attention to into 2022. I didn't want to get too granular. Of course, it's a holiday. I'm not sure how many people are actually out there trading, but these are some longer term thoughts from the weekly time frame charts as we head into the new year. If you enjoyed the video today or learned anything new, let me know in the comments section or by giving the video a thumbs up. If you enjoy trading crypto and you want this to continue into the next year as well, let me know in the comments down below. Also, feel free to suggest coins down there. Again, I'm just sort of looking at what's trending and the big names that I personally know. If you have a great suggestion and you want me to put it on my radar, let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to do it. Again, with all of that being said, I wish you all a happy new year and a green trading year.